All right, let's go to the Bud Light Hotline. We got Rodney Orr with us this morning. Good morning, Rodney. How are you?
How are you, buddy?
Doing well. Let's start with the scrimmage. What have you been able to piece together? What have you heard both positively and negatively from this past Saturday afternoon at Bryant-Denny Stadium?
Well, I would say, Gary, I think I sense a lot of positive. Obviously, Alabama has things that maybe are question marks still. Not saying that's not the case, but I think when you look at it overall on both sides and in the kicking game, the things that we've heard have been very positive. Let's start on offense if you want to. Obviously, we know about all the weapons they have, but I think one of the keys is the offensive line, and I think that has a chance to be much improved over last year. I think when you look at the tackles with Leatherwood and Wills, we know about those guys, but on the interior, it looks like they have a lot of options to choose from and that are good options. So on that interior part of the offensive line, if you want to talk specifically, I don't think we know exactly right now, especially probably at center and guard, which two guys will line up at those spots, and I say right guard specifically. Left guard, I think Evan Neal will be the guy. But I do think they have some options working on the interior part of the offensive line. Now, the one question I would say is at tight end. We know that that's a position that's not where it needs to be. They've lost some players. Obviously, Irv Smith, Hell Hinches, and then Kedrick James now, gone from the program. So Forrestall still limited in what he can do. Cameron Latu is a guy who moved over from defense, still probably, grasping things there. Could be a great opportunity, Gary, for a walk-on like Giles Amos. We keep hearing his name prominently, that he did some nice things in the scrimmage. So, we'll see how that position shapes up. And you certainly would hope that Major Tennyson, a guy that was really highly recruited out of Bullard, Texas, a few years ago, now he's a junior. This is a great opportunity for him. Hopefully he can step up and lend something there as well. In the backfield, we know about Najee and Brian Robinson. We've talked about them. Jerome Ford had the injury. Fortunately, it looks like it was only a minor ankle sprain that would keep him out only a week. So I think the depth situation is something to keep an eye on. We can look at the defensive side. Looks like that defensive class that we really hailed so much, Gary, throughout the recruiting process last year, going to certainly play a big role, I think, on this team. You look at DJ Dale, though he did not scrimmage, has been out last week or so with a knee sprain. I think he's got a chance to be a difference maker on the interior. Justin Aboibe's another young defensive lineman that I think has a chance to be really good. King Makuta, an outside linebacker. I think he has a chance to be a pass rushing force eventually. And then at inside linebacker, a guy that we've talked about repeatedly that has a chance with his athleticism to be a great player eventually is Kristin Harris, and we saw him line up with the ones Saturday in the scrimmage. So that's kind of in a nutshell the offense and the defense, just some of the names to touch on. But I would also say, too, Gary, Will Reichard from Hoover, the freshman punter / place kicker, he could be a real difference maker on this team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think he could be an impact player. Back to the offensive line, Rod, and I've said for the record, I think this is going to be an outstanding offensive line. I mean, they've recruited a lot of highly rated players, big, strong specimen types, but Landon Dickerson, I want to get your take on this and follow me here. I think he's a gifted player. He was gifted out of high school. Alabama recruited him, but he goes to Florida State. He transfers in, doesn't get here until right before the start of fall camp, and now he's battling for a starting position. I know he's good, but what does that say about all these offensive linemen that have been in the program for several years, many of them, and here's a guy who just transfers in from another school, and here I'm bragging about how Alabama's recruited all these guys, and they've been in the program, and here's a guy just slides in here and may start. Is that just how good he is, or is that a negative on the guys that have been recruited here?
Well, I understand. That's a good question, but I think, too, you have to, first of all, look at Landon Dickerson. He was a five-star player. He started as a true freshman at Florida State. That tells you a little bit of something there at Florida State with Jimbo Fisher. He's a guy that is very talented. He's got a lot of versatility. That's a key there. He can play so many different spots. Gary, I think he can play all five spots, really.
Wow.
I think he's that versatile. He's got great size, got a tremendous attitude. So I think all of those things kind of point more towards, Landon Dickerson is a guy with experience, even though injuries limited him some for the last couple of years. He's got the talent. He's got the mindset. And I think he came in really hungry. So I don't really think it's necessarily a bad thing in terms of the players that Alabama has now or has had. They're certainly battling with him for one of those interior spots. So whether he ends up at center or guard, I just think that it's more about Landon Dickerson than it would be about the other guys.
And you already mentioned on defense a name that has just jumped to the forefront, and that's Kristin Harris, the true freshman out of Baton Rouge. Of course, obviously Josh McMillan goes down. I thought maybe Markel Benton would have the edge there at that spot. But Saban pointed out Saturday after the scrimmage, Rodney, whether it's been Rolando McClain or Dante Hightower or C.J. Mosley, they've had true freshman linebackers come in here and were good enough to get on the field, and they played them. And, they just said, hey, get some experience. This looks like that may be the case with this guy, that he might wind up playing himself into a starting position as a true freshman at inside linebacker.
Well, yeah, and I did, Saban's comments were real interesting because it's not that he was comparing Harris to those guys, but at the same time, it's almost like he was putting them in their company as true freshmen, obviously. So that tells you a lot. But I'll say this too, Gary. I mean, this guy is he is extremely athletic. For 6'2", maybe 6'1", 240 pounds. He's a guy that in high school was a safety, played even some cornerback. And I'm talking about at 235 pounds as a senior. I mean, I saw his tape, and here he is returning a kickoff. Looked like Eddie Lacy put a spin move on some guy and returned that kickoff 90 yards for a touchdown. That's just kind of how athletic he is. And he's adjusting now to that inside linebacker spot. And the one thing that I think that was key that Nick Saban said is he's a football player. He runs and he hits people. And I think that's one thing at inside linebacker, Gary, you have to have that mindset. You have to be a physical player. You have to be smart, obviously, and have the athletic ability and be able to move side to side. But you also have to be able to have that mindset of bringing the wood. And I think that's obviously what he's shown them he has.
Mac Jones has performed well, and clearly, as Saban said, he's distanced himself from the two freshman quarterbacks, as you would expect with his experience as the backup. I want to ask you about Tua, though, because I heard from a couple of people that he didn't look maybe as comfortable as he's looked in the past. Are you hearing anything in regards to this switchover offensively? And, of course, they're going to take some snaps under center and going to do a few more things differently, obviously, with a new offensive coordinator. Is he transitioning well into this new offense with Steve Sarkisian?
Well, I would say this. I think he is, and I think that he, all the feedback I got for the most part was that he was sharp, looked really good, but that at times you have to say this, Gary. On the flip side, we talk about Tua, but let's give some credit to what they're doing on the defensive side.
Right.
I think it's more about what they're doing defensively.
Right.
Here's the one big takeaway I've got from this scrimmage, okay, versus a year ago this time. A year ago this time, I was hearing receivers are running wide open all over the field. There seems to be confusion defensively. Nobody's picking these guys up. On the flip side of that, what I heard from Saturday was the coverage for the most part, especially among the older guys, was really good, and the pressure was really good. So they got some pressure at times, and again, then you might say, well, the offensive line, but again, keep in mind, they're working different combinations up front too. So the cohesiveness there up front offensively may not be throughout a scrimmage what you would normally think. But so I say this to say that again, the coverage was really good. I think that's promising. I mean, they made Tua think some. They made him not be able to get rid of the ball as quickly, perhaps. And then again, they've got the rush coming. So I really think it's more about the Alabama defense than it is maybe what was Tua doing.
Do you think the secondary, because you're right, last year at times they did break down. Do you think this secondary, based on what you've heard and seen so far, and Shy Carter didn't even participate on Saturday, has a chance to be special? That has a chance to be one of Nick Saban's better secondaries?
Well, I think there's a ton of talent. I mean, when you look at those big corners, how they line them up, I think Joshua Jobe has a chance. And we've said this for a long time, that he's one of the best pure cover corners they've had. One corner, I'm talking about in the nickel. So you got Jobe at one corner, you've got Diggs at the other, you've got Surtain that plays the star. Diggs can play the star as well. Shy Carter's played there in the past, but then you've got the safeties, Xavier McKinney and Jared Maiden. You've got also Shy Carter has worked at that safety spot. You mentioned he wasn't there Saturday, which he was not. And then also Daniel Wright has played some there. So, yeah, I think it's a really talented group. I think they're going to be, and I've said this before, well coordinated back there. I think Charles Kelly has a great understanding of what the Nick Saban system is. That's helpful. Carl Scott's been in the program now for a year, so he's got a better feel for it. Pete Golding, now the defensive coordinator, he's got a better feel for it after a year. And I go back to Sal Sunseri. I go back to Brian Baker. I just think defensively, this is a solid group of coaches, really, really solid, and have a great understanding of what the Nick Saban system is. And I think that they do a great job of teaching these guys. So I just think it's a lot different situation than a year ago.
All right, last comment, thought, Rodney. We haven't really talked about the running backs, and clearly there's a lot of anticipation that Harris and Robinson are going to be top-notch. I lost Trey Sanders already. Jerome Ford, thankfully, only going to be out a short period of time. But they did lose two guys to the NFL, a first-rounder, Josh Jacobs, a third-rounder, Damian Harris. And then I did hear that both Najee and Robinson put it on the ground Saturday. Am I overvaluing these running backs, maybe based on their potential and their high school ratings, or should we be concerned that maybe the running game won't be as productive as some of us are assuming?
I think the running game is going to come down to much more the offensive line than it is those running backs. I mean, I think, again, I'd be interested to see Najee and Brian Robinson. I think they could be a tremendous 1-2 punch. I know I really wish Trey Sanders was healthy. That would be a real difference too, but he's not. So this is a great opportunity for Jerome Ford. Hopefully he gets healthy really quickly and gets back in there. He had a great first scrimmage. And then Keelan Robinson, the true freshman who brings a lot of quickness, a lot of speed, explosive playmaking ability. So I think that, Gary, these backs should be just fine. Again, I'm not sure yet that they're, as a group, as good as some of the ones that we've had come through here, but we don't know that. I think they have to get out there and prove it. But I do think that if the offensive line is improved and opening those holes and giving these guys some opportunities, I will be surprised if Brian Robinson and Najee Harris aren't really productive.
All right. Rodney, TiderInsider.com has been bumping lately. Of course, our TV show every Tuesday night. But if people have been hearing about Tider Insider, and I think most everybody has, but have never made the decision to jump on and join, now would be a great time going into football season.
It really would, Gary. It's only $48 a year. That's just $4 a month. You can get instant access with your credit card, or if you prefer, there's an address there to send a check. Gives you access to all the premium stuff and also the forums where there is a ton of discussion going on right now. And Gary also might mention Tider Insider TV that we do, our live TV show every Tuesday night. We have it posted there on Tider Insider TV. people can watch that for free, and the other videos that WVUA provides. The Nick Saban press conferences, player interviews, whatever it might be. Also, the great practice video that Gary Harris himself shoots sometime. That's all right there on TiderInsider.com.
TiderInsider.com. Get on board today. Thanks, Rod.